Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt.
There's another remarkable statement he makes, and it is in the discussion of the reality of the episode. He says, "That is all there is in reality, what you felt."
Yeah. This Don Juan's a very sophisticated thinker. Really, it's not easy to come to grips with him. You see, I had tried various times, to sort of wrestle with him intellectually, and he always comes the victor. He's very artful in that he posed once the idea to me that the totality of the universe it's just perception, and it's how we perceive things, and there are no facts, only interpretations, and those are I'm nearly quoting him, paraphrasing him as close as I can. And perhaps he's right in that sense, or not perhaps, I think he's right in that sense. Is the facts are nothing else but interpretations that our brain makes, so stimuli. So if that's such, whatever I felt was, of course, the important thing.
That was an excerpt from an interview with Carlos Castaneda from 1969. This episode really doesn't require much more of an introduction than I began the first part of this series with several months ago. I will refer you to episode 7, where I talk with Hunter Muse about her time in the cult of Carlos Castaneda. She sets up the story there about what brought her to the point in her life where she encountered the books of Carlos Castaneda, which eventually led her to become a part of the cult of personality later on, and continues to dive deeper into the saga in this segment. We will find out more about the teachings that Carlos espoused that went beyond those of the alleged Yaqui shaman Don Juan. I start off the conversation by asking Hunter if the character of Don Juan was fictitious. Does that also mean that his teachings were?
I think it's important to note that I don't necessarily believe that that the experiences that he had were fictional. What I believe happened is that, for probably several reasons, he took several different experiences, several different people, and he combined them into this character he called Don Juan Matus. Do I believe that he had experiences with Indians in Arizona and in the Sonora Desert in Mexico? I think it's possible. From the level of research that I've been able to do, it seems to be more likely that he did not have experiences with Yaqui Indians per se, that this was not the Yaqui way of knowledge. This is not the teachings of the Yaqui. That he took these great teachings from other sources and he mashed them into this character and then turned around and took that character and monetized it. I don't think that he was alone in this process. I think that there were other forces at UCLA that enabled him to do that. The deeper that you delve into the research, which you'll find, just using, as one example, Castaneda's Journey, the Power, and the Allegory, the Richard DeMille book, just using that as a resource, you can see that DeMille really took pains to go back to UCLA and try to connect with specific professors in specific departments that Carlos was engaged and involved with. And he was really stonewalled in many ways when he posed some very earnest, very serious questions. So, I think that where we have to kind of draw the line is where we decide mythology is more important than corroboration and evidence. Carlos didn't have the evidence to prove that he had these experiences. The claim by C.J. Castaneda, his once adopted son, was that all of the field notes had been in a basement in Los Angeles and had been destroyed in a flood.
Interesting.
So that would, that really puts you in this flimsy place where you think, well, so there was only one place that he had all of his notes. I as a writer, and I certainly would never put myself in the same category of Castaneda or anyone who has published myriad books. I think the thing to question is you didn't have duplicate copies of these notes. You didn't back them up in any way. Did you have someone that took those field notes and transcribed them for you or cleaned them up in any way? That's just odd. Like, you, especially something like this that would be considered a historic document and really could be even put in the Smithsonian, because this was unprecedented work. There was no one at that point who was able to come out of that situation with as much detailed information about these practices, these sorceric practices that he claimed that he had these experiences with Don Juan. So wouldn't you want to have evidence? It seems like that's kind of the obvious position that you would take, is I have to have ways to be able to show people that what I experienced was real, not just my story.
But would that be within an academic setting or just to his peers?
If you are selling a book as nonfiction, and presenting it as research, I think the onus is on you to be able to substantiate that research. Mm-hmm. If you are selling a book that's fiction, that's like Harry Potter, no one is asking J.K. Rowling to show any evidence that these characters ever existed because she's writing fiction.
It's just interesting because there are New Age bookstores full of books of people channeling the prophecies of the Zeta Reticuli lights, however you would properly pronounce the citizens, the denizens of Zeta Reticuli. Am I even pronouncing that right? And nobody gives a shit about challenging them, but there's a lot of onus on Carlos Castaneda. Is that because he became so popular? Is that because it actually developed into a cult where there were lives and drama in the balance? Is it because it amounted to something? There was something there?
I think the shift happens when you sell 7 million books and your books have been translated into 26 plus languages. Mm-hmm. I think suddenly you have a broader spectrum of people that are inquiring into your work. It's not this limited audience that maybe you write a book about ghost stories in this specific town, and people in that town are very connected to those stories and really want to make sure that those stories are told in a specific way, that's their lore. That's one thing. That person may be writing something that is so subjective that it doesn't really matter if you get all the details right. There will be a limited audience that really care. In this situation, if you're selling a system of belief, if you're selling a package and you're monetizing that package and you are saying this is the doctrine, this is the fact, then I think it really, really behooves you to be able to support those claims and those tenets.
Okay, fair enough. I hear when you gave me a bunch of stuff to read through in order that I could ask better educated questions. At least that was the idea. I kept running across this term inorganic beings. What are they classifying as inorganic beings?
An inorganic being is you could say a nebulous energy, or an energy that exists in the second attention. The first attention is what we know as the known world, the world that we live in, the world that we all, the consensus reality, we can call that. The second attention is the realm of energy, the realm of, some people would say, spirit. And that is the morphogenic field that Rupert Sheldrake speaks of. So when we talk about inorganic beings, you could imagine our awareness and the other awareness, that second attention, and maybe 7, 8 other attentions outside of that as layers of an onion. So we are in this specific layer of the onion. We have a certain type of perception that we are allotted when we are given the human body, which is very limited. I consider Earth a school. So we're here to learn and to evolve in our own seed state. The second attention is the place where a lot of these agreements and a lot of this work happens. It's the world of dreaming. It's a place where if you continue according to Castaneda, but also, again, this comes from myriad different belief systems, believe in dreaming and energy and being able to shift your perception and shift your awareness. If you are capable of shifting your attention to the second attention and having the same level of awareness that you have in your first attention, you can encounter inorganic beings in this first attention, and you can also encounter them in the second attention. So in the first attention, if you have raised your level of awareness, it's like I go to a concert and I look over and I see this reptilian being, or I see this alien that has come from the second attention. Because I have enough energy, I'm able to perceive that thing. The tricky part is that thing can perceive me too. Now, there can be a battle for my energy because I've vibrated a certain frequency where this thing is aware that I'm vibrating at a higher frequency than other people that are in the first attention. So there's a lot of caution when making these leaps and making these decisions to try these behaviors that would wake you up in this state, because you have to have a lot of sobriety to be able to handle what you're perceiving. When you're in a dream state, the reason that the dreams are so wispy and kind of hard to hold on to is because you're still very much in the first attention. Your body's still very much connected to the human experience, the known. So when we go into this energy field, this morphogenic field, it can be kind of a scary proposition because you don't know if you can get out of it. And some people wake up in the dream and then never wake up back in their normal awareness in the first attention. So these inorganic beings have the ability to create an environment around you that you think is your normal life, when in reality you've been trapped somewhere. You're in this other reality.
In the Matrix.
trapped in the Matrix. And this is what they claimed happened to Don Juan. That Don Juan, when he made his leap, he didn't make it past the second attention. So when people asked in the seminars, what does that mean? They said, we don't know. We think this is what we think. We think he's trapped in the second attention somewhere. So, it sounds very, there's a darkness there where it's like something's going to eat my energy or eat my awareness. Again, I think that that's part of the strength and the sobriety, is to be able to take that on head on and be able to keep your energy contained and not be subjected to that, which is possible.
Our attention can they be seen sort of like different frequencies, different vibrations?
I think everything, I don't think, this is science, that everything is a frequency, everything is a vibration. And so, again, these are all agreements that we are making, how much we're letting in through the cipher, how much energy can you take? So, how much are you able to perceive is really, for me, it's very much connected to the ego. Because the ego is the thing that needs certainty. When the stuff we're talking about has to do way more with fluidity and not being certain and allowing energy to present itself to you, which is a challenge.
Is there something to the philosophy that sort of lends itself to taking your awareness to a certain level where you can take it to the second attention and maintain that? Is there something, it seems like there was something that I read about that
I
dynamic.
think that the thing that's interesting about our melding of these two attentions and the ability to take your same level of awareness in your daily life and apply that to your dreaming world, I think that we all have the facility and all have the ability to do that. I think that where we get lodged and stuck is in these daily concerns, is in these myopic discourses or exchanges, these kind of monochromatic echo chambers we get into with our egos.
The small picture.
The small picture. I think that's the stuff that stops us from being able to make that transition. That's where the term sobriety comes. It's not about not imbibing or denying yourself something. It's about being able to manage your energy in the most efficient way possible when you're in a situation that is heightened.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean,
I want a ticket.
Sure. And see, that's what's so great is that if you look at the work, you step away from the man and you look at the work and you do the work, you can have incredible experiences, mind-blowing, mind-altering experiences. I think what fucks us up is that we start to deify people and suddenly it becomes about the master and not the teachings. And that's very much what happened with Castaneda, is that what made him so powerful was the mythos.
And he was well aware of that, right?
He really, he really milked that cow for as much as he could. When he was taken out of the public eye, he went on the party circuit in California and Los Angeles. And so it's kind of like having a monkey with a hurdy-gurdy dancing in the corner. You know that if you throw a party and you invite Carlos Castaneda, that of course everyone's going to show up and suddenly you're going to be, considered the coolest person in the world because you're able to engage the godfather of the New Age movement. So I think he really got into that. He got into hanging out with famous people. And so it became less and less about the Don Juan teachings and more about cultivating this persona that he'd created.
And going back to attentions, so are there infinite attentions? I mean, does it go on, or are we only aware of a certain amount, or does it matter?
I think that, again, that's kind of a subjective question. I think that's really kind of based on what your own karma is and what your own experience is. We can go on these flights of fancy and create as many attentions as we need. What is real? What is real? What is not real? So if you have conjured something up that is your own experience, there's no one here that can negate that for you and say that's not true. You have to be the architect of your own journey. And so if you need there to be 50 attentions and you're only on one, and that's what keeps you disciplined to get on, to stay on the path, then that's what some people need. For me, I'm really working on what I feel is tangible, which is my own snags, my own behavior, watching myself and how I engage and interact with the world. And I think that that's the thing that is way more important to focus on than this idea of there being other places to go that are way more magical than this. Like, let's work on this attention.
Sure. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. The mistake of many philosophy and religion, holding out for something that may or may not come.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, something will come, but whether that particular version will or not is to be yet to be determined. Something else that kind of confused me when I was reading through that stuff is that it kept being emphasized that women were seen as sacred because they possess a womb. They can create, yet procreating was discouraged. So what does that mean that the whole Castanedian outlook towards children were? I mean, were they something precious, or were they just sort of necessary?
It's so bizarre to me, because allegedly Don Juan had a son that he came upon who had been murdered and was in the process of dying. That's in one of the books. That
it's been a while since.
that Carlos talks about. Carlos was married to Margaret Runyon, and Margaret Runyon had a child, and Carlos proceeded to try to adopt this child. And not only, what's really, really bizarre is that he tried to adopt CJ, and then he paraded CJ around UCLA without Margaret, as though this was his child. It's so weird. Like, I still can't really figure all of that out, like why he would have done that. But when you go into a cult environment, one of the big red flags is control of sexual behavior. When people start telling you who you can be intimate with and who you can't, and who has energy and who doesn't, and you have to have sex with the leader in order to reach freedom, all the things that he said, when these things start happening, that's when you need to take a step back and go, wait a second. Okay, what's going on here? This is the same thing in the Castaneda realm, because he talked a lot about women being powerful, and women have two brains, and one of the brains is the womb, and that if a woman has sexual encounters or intercourse with someone, that person puts luminous worms inside of them that when you're in the second attention you can see, and that it takes 7 years of recapitulation and no sex to remove those worms. So every time you have intercourse with someone, you are lighting up those worms, and every person you've ever had sex with, you're lighting that person up too. So the way to control women is, you can't have sex. And if you do have sex, it's got to be with me because my sperm is magical and my sperm will actually heal you and help you to get to infinity. And a lot of people who walked into this world had children already. So what he said was that when you conceive a child, that a child takes a chunk of the mother's luminous egg and the father's luminous egg. And that for the rest of that child's life, both parents are energetically fighting that child to get that energy back. That's what creates all of these weird dichotomies with parents, these struggles with their child, is they're fighting for that energy. So women, of course, on the outside, we look at that very much like the feminist movement. It seems like it's all about empowering women. It seems like it's all about women taking ownership of their sexuality and their reality. But the subtext of all of that is really there's some man in there trying to control a woman and her behavior by this illusion of freedom. And so that's really what he did. He had a specific type of woman he liked. He had all the women cut their hair like young boys. He liked women that had very small breasts. He liked women that had very small bodies, that were very bird-like, that did not look like women, that looked like young boys, frankly. So again, when you're looking at someone who says women are powerful and this is what happens when you have children and you procreate, when you look at that and then you look at the type of woman that this person likes or is surrounding himself with, you're going, wow, that doesn't look like a very powerful woman. It looks like you've actually taken the power away from that woman. So what you're selling and saying, but the actions around the people that you're surrounding yourself are incongruent. And so that was the part I always thought was a little bit weird. It was like, you've made all these rules about cut your hair because hair has personal history, and don't have children, and you can't have sex with your partner because you're both bored fucks. Neither one of you have any energy. So again, it's planting these seeds in participants that they're not okay, that they're wrong, that their instinct or their behavior or who they are empirically is not okay. And unless you have these teachings, you're not going to be okay.
It seems like there's a lot of, or another recurring theme, energy related, is energy deficiency. Like all of these things are going to suck your energy and take your energy away, which lends itself to the idea that there's a finite amount of energy to be had. Did they believe that? Like you only had a certain amount and you couldn't replenish it, or you had to fuck Carlos to get it?
Okay, that's an excellent question, because again, this really goes back down to like the seeds of what these teachings purport. What Carlos claimed, and I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's probably right. How your parents, how their sexual energy was combined when you were conceived is very informative to the type of energy that you will have as a human being, because you are a piece of both of those energies. So that, I totally get that, and I agree with that. To say that that is a fixed thing and that you're never going to be able to separate yourself from that karma or have your own energy, I think is erroneous. What he claimed was that these beings that live in the second attention, the flyers, what he claimed was that these beings have eaten, when you're born, as I said, you are given this cocoon of energy. Now, what doesn't make sense is that he then said that our energy has been eaten down to the level of our between our big toes. What doesn't make sense is if you're a bored fuck, how did you have a complete cocoon of energy? That those two things aren't consistent with what his story is. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you have a ton of energy, you were born with this massive burst of energy. The claim was that both parents had to have an orgasm in order for you not to be a bored fuck.
Simultaneously?
Not simultaneously, but your mother had to have an orgasm in that sexual exchange in order, when you were conceived, in order for you to have a lot of chi, to have a full cocoon, I guess. So what he said is that we start as these whole luminous eggs, and that as we get older, the energy, he described it a couple of different ways, which were not consistent. In one way, he said it was eaten all the way down, like a caterpillar eats the inside of his cocoon to get out of it, when he turns into a butterfly.
Eaten by what?
For the flyers.
Okay.
Okay, so he's saying that self-concern eats this energy down, that our awareness down to the point between our toes. Then he also said at a seminar that our behavior, what it's actually done, has shoved all of the energy to the outer edges of that cocoon like bark. And so the reason that we were doing these very like kung fu chopping movements in the tensegrity was that we were trying to chip that bark away to get to loosen it back, to get it back into our luminous egg, as opposed to it being on the outer edges. So, I mean, one way or the other, it doesn't really matter. Has something eaten my energy away, or has something thrown it to the edges of my luminous egg? The reality is that I am my own being. There is not anything that can take anything away from me that I am not giving. There is not something that can give me something that I'm not willing to receive. This victim mentality that we have in our culture really makes us kind of like a wisp in the wind. Like we're basically just victims to whomever we experience.
We're at the whim of our circumstances.
We're at the whim of the lot of that our parents have given us, the level, the caste that we are born into. And I think that that's the thing that when we talk about our luminous egg, we really have to examine is how much of my attention or my power am I giving away to other people, and how much of that am I owning and saying, I'm doing this freely, I'm doing this willingly. I think that's the step, that's the first step to start to heal your energy and start to be more autonomous and more whole and get out of this victimhood mentality that we're sold.
Well, okay. Can you go into a little more detail about flyers? What flyers are? And wasn't there somebody that supposedly took a photograph of a flyer?
Yes. So Carlos talked about flyers being these beings that live in the inorganic world that, you know, if you look through modern history, there are kind of floating devil images or cloven-hoofed beings that kind of look like they could be a cross between a dragon and a goat and a man. This is the energy that he was talking about when he was talking about the flyers. Now, what he said about that was that in the 90s, Tony Karam, who is the head of Casa Tibet in Mexico, was at an event at Teotihuacan with the Dalai Lama, and there were 100,000 Buddhists there that were praying at this sacred site. So Tony had his camera and he was taking some rapid succession photos where you can take, 5-6 frames within a few seconds. And he did this. And when he developed the film, he captured this image of something that was leaping in the air above all of these Buddhists. He didn't know what this thing was, so he sent it to Carol Tiggs. Carol Tiggs showed Carlos Castaneda, and Carlos Castaneda freaked out because he took this as an omen. First of all, that there were 100,000 Buddhists at this sacred site, and they were meditating there. And secondly, that at this event, they saw this thing, or Tony was able to capture this thing on his camera. So he took that as an omen that Tony was supposed to be the new Nawal, that he was supposed to take over his role when Carlos died. Now, they went back and forth saying that Carlos was the last Nawal, it was the end of the line. But in the process, I think as he got older, literally within the last several years of his life, I think they were trying to figure out what to do with the Carlos Castaneda brand. And so they were trying to hand this thing to Tony because Tony had captured this image. Now, they showed the image of the flyer at several seminars that I was at. I saw the image. I have reached out to Tony Karam to try to get a example of that image sent to me so that I can share it with the public, because I think it's an important piece of information. It's an important document, perhaps, again, a historical document that needs to be shown to the public. Because if there is some enmeshing or some folding over of one attention to the next, and there are these reptilian or demonic or negative forces that are able to penetrate our awareness and our energies, I think we all as a collective deserve to know that and be able to protect ourselves, because there's ways that you can protect yourself. So the part that was interesting to me was that this thing came to this sacred site with these Buddhists. What it says to me is that what we were talking about before. If you do this work, any type of spiritual work, meditate, inner silence, exercise with intent, anything that you do, and you start to raise your energy, you become like a flashlight in an otherwise dark room. So imagine 100,000 flashlights shining at once. Of course, if there's some demonic or evil intended energy, of course they're going to be attracted to that space. And the fact that Tony was able to take a photo just makes it even more, to me, it just drives the evidence home.
Yeah, I'd love to see that photograph. Like it just came, like it just phased into this dimension for a little bit and phased out.
It phased into this dimension. Now, what Carlos is saying is that this thing can be on you and you don't even know it.
Like an archon or something.
Like an archon. So these places where we get self-concern, staring at the mirror for hours on end, primping and preening, we're basically opening our souls up and our energies up like a porthole to anything that is rigid enough but also fluid enough to penetrate one phylum to the next. And I do believe that's possible.
Well, I think when you passively watch media too, especially when you're the kind of person that just sort of channel surfs and just stumbles onto things, and you often just watch it for the spectacle, not because you're getting anything nourishing from it, then your eyes start to glaze over, and then let the programming begin.
It truly is shocking and alarming that we even have a term for it. The fact that any of us know the term fear porn, and that we have a direct resonant understanding of what that means because we have felt it, where you turn on something on YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram where something comes into your frame of reference or your feed that is so shocking and so alarming that you get that, like, it's almost like a skip beat of your heart, or your whole energy gets tight. that is the time right then that you are most vulnerable, and you really have to guard yourself and make sure that you're not feeding those thoughts and that you're not allowing yourself to dive into that ocean, because that ocean is just as infinite as the ocean of pure possibilities. That morphogenic field has just as many beautiful, utopian, magical elements to it. We just seem to be attracted to that darkness because we're food. These flyers are feeding on us. He described it like we're chickens in a chicken coop. So these media outlets and these things, they get a charge off of scaring people. So there's even a more nefarious thing that's at play there, because these things can be infected with this quote unquote flyer's mind that feeds off sugar, by the way.
Oh, shit.
So watch your sugar intake.
Oh, my God. Mine will improve greatly within the next 24 hours.
That's why we have these racing thoughts, and, we get really we triggered by things that we see. It's like, you got to be able to look at that and say, okay, what is that? What part of this am I playing? Is this my voice, or is this something else, some foreign entity that's coming in and speaking for me?
I like it. Well, I don't like it, like the experience, but I like your explanation of it, the way that you articulate it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The phrase "burning from within," how would you describe that? What is the significance of that?
Well, it's such a romantic notion, and it talk about aspirational. If you were ever going to want to aspire to something, it would be to potentially take your awareness with you when you die. And this is like the cornerstone. This is the linchpin of his sales pitch, was that if you follow these tenets, if you do these specific things, at the moment that you die, you have an opportunity to take your awareness with you. That dance that you do with death will not result in your form leaving your spirit, those two things separating from each other.
And it's like a memory wipe, too, in a sense. Like, it's hard for people to remember generally their different incarnations.
What he's claiming is that once you've reached this level of awareness, that you would take every element of yourself, including the shoes that are on your feet, at the moment that you have that dance with death. And it is actually, in his words, it's an actual dance. There's an actual engagement that you have with death that is basically the determinant of how your spirit or your energy moves on.
So dress mindfully.
Make sure you have your favorite pair of shoes on. This is something that he used to say all the time.
Yeah,
he used to say, make sure you have your favorite pair of shoes on, because you're going to be wearing them into infinity.
Interesting. So just get rid of your Crocs right off the bat. Okay, so then the idea, the concept of being a warrior is something that comes up a lot too, and there are tenets that you have to abide by to do that, right? There's
Absolutely.
a list of things.
Yeah.
You want to go through them, and we
Sure.
can. Okay.
Sure.
The one that probably most people are familiar with and that has gotten a lot of press is the tensegrity, and we even mentioned it in the first part of this interview, which in the introduction I will have already referred you to, that is brought up also in the OA, the Netflix series. But tell us about, it's the series of body movements that are...
Well, again, I try to refer specifically to his initial work, to really try to gather as much of the details around what was going on as I possibly can. And nowhere from 1959, when he got into UCLA in the anthropology department. Nowhere in any of he only has one published paper. Nowhere in any of the classes he taught at Irvine, nowhere in any of the talks that he gave prior to 1993 did he ever, or 92, did he ever once mention tensegrity?
Strange.
Ever. Not one word. If you go and ask a Yaqui Indian what is tensegrity, they will look at you like you have three heads.
Although now they're probably so used to it, they would probably just roll their eyes.
Because we've invaded their sacred space.
It's probably the Don Juan cottage industry down there to this is where he fucking took the peyote. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
So what is it?
Tensegrity is a sequence of movements that Carlos Castaneda purported that were handed down through the 17 generations of Yaqui Nawals and sorcerer parties. He claimed that there were millions of these movements, but as I said, prior to 1992, 91, somewhere in that area, never once mentioned them and I'm talking at any private talks he gave. He never taught people movement secretly, never. So somewhere along the lines, now all of the women in the group were involved with karate. Well, Taisha Abelar and Florinda Donner, the two other primary witches, were involved with kung fu and karate when they first met Carlos. And there's a lot of documentation to support that. Photographs of them in gis doing movements. So my theory behind tensegrity is that when they got to the place of wanting to start to do seminars, they knew that just kind of popping these people up and propping them up on stage and having them talk was not going to be enough. There wouldn't be enough cellular memory there to get people engaged. What he was masterful at was understanding that if you add movement to the brainwashing, that really drives that home. I mean, you can really get it. You can get inside people's heads and you can get inside their muscles that way. And so tensegrity became a really important piece of this puzzle, and that became the thing that drew people in to these seminars, was learning these movements.
And again, I'll refer you to the first part of this, where you will see tensegrity pop up in the OA, if you haven't seen it already. So the next one is a pretty popular one too, one that you hear talked about a lot, and that is very important. Recapitulation.
Now, recapitulation was, Jason reminded me, that recapitulation, Jason Horsley, by the way, mentioned that recapitulation was mentioned in the books. It had been so many years since I read the books that some of this stuff escaped me because I got mired in other levels of the teachings. Sure. The idea behind recapitulation, it's kind of, I would say that the closest thing I could liken it to would be Sisyphus and the rock. It is a untenable task. The idea is that every exchange that you have had in your life, from when you went to the grocery store or the corner store and you made eye contact with the girl who gave you your change, from that exchange, the most minute exchanges that you can have with people, even someone walking down the street and passing you in the street, from that level of minutia all the way back to your parents, the idea is that you are supposed to write a list of every single person that you have had any kind of an exchange with. If you don't know that person's name, it would be girl with the red shirt on at Target who looked at me. That would be the way that you would write that in your list. The idea of the recapitulation is that every exchange we have snags our energy.
Energy.
Even if it's just a little bit. Again, remember, we had this luminous egg that was complete, but our self-concerns, our daily life has eaten that down to the point between our toes. And so the only way to become a whole luminous egg again is to create this list, do these tenets. Part of that is creating this list and then sitting down in a enclosed space and breathing away, basically trying to recreate, like in the movie screen of your mind, recreating the scene that you had. So if it was a grocery store thing, I see myself walking through the store, I see all the people I saw, I'm taking breaths, I'm moving my head right to left as I'm breathing out all of the connections of these exchanges that I've had. And so you would do it on a daily basis. This could take you hours. It was all contingent on your discipline. It could take you hours and hours and hours to just do your day, not even touch the big list of all the people you've ever met and really had exchanges with. So how he had you do it was you started with your sexual experiences, because those, again, we go back to sexual energy. Sexual energy is most charged. It takes the most attention. So we start recapitulating all the people we've had sex with, from the last person you had sex with to the first person you ever had sex with. And not only the people, but every single experience. So if you were in a relationship with someone for a decade and you had sex on a regular basis, you got to go back and try to remember every single time that you had intercourse. I mean, talk about...
For better or worse.
Talk about Sisyphus trying to push a rock up a hill. I mean, that seems impossible.
It seems vaguely Scientology-like. Like, don't they have something, maybe that's what auditing is. Like, they go through every single goddamn detail of your life.
Yeah, the difference with auditing and this, and I know a lot about Scientology, the difference with auditing is that auditing is filmed. Not only is auditing filmed, but auditing is then... basically, they take all of that information and they hold it against you. With Castaneda, you never have to show your list to Castaneda. He didn't want to see your list. He didn't give a shit who you'd screwed. People would come to him at seminars and say, I dreamt that, and he would be like, I don't want to hear your dreams. He didn't want to masturbate with you mentally while you told him about the lady down the street who gave you the hairy eyeball when you put out your trash bin incorrectly. He didn't care. It's like that, that wasn't part of his work. That was your work that you had to do.
What about not doing? What is not doing?
Not doing is a really interesting way of observing your reality. So if you do things by rote, it is taking your life and basically putting a spotlight on everything that you do. If you wake up and you you get out of the same side of the bed, you brush your teeth in a specific way, you shower and touch your body in specific ways, all of those things are very autopilot. So that's the stuff that keeps us asleep. Carlos studied glossing, a term that he tried to adopt as his own, but there's actually other research that had been done about it that he was completely fascinated with. And glossing very much falls into not doing, because glossing, again, is about not observing your reality. What not doing does is it forces you to be in your body and be present. So he would have people wear their shoes on the opposite feet, wear an eye patch, put your clothes on backward, like wear your clothes backwards. Do things that bring you into the now and into the present. So again, not doing would be something that is an actual exercise that you engage in every single day. It's a way to observe yourself, catch your ego, catch your snags, and be able to rectify that stuff.
I can be down with that for sure. Gazing. What about gazing?
Gazing is I would say the simplest way for me to describe it is a meditation with your eyes open. Now, when I say your eyes open, I'm not saying like bug-eyed all the way open. I'm saying like, kind of relaxing your eyes where your eyelashes are almost touching each other, where there's kind of an ease to your eyes or a relaxation in your eyes, and you're looking at something without staring at it. So what you're attempting to do is to see the energy of something. So the best place to do that would be leaves of a tree, shadows, light flickering. So a fire is a great place to gaze. These are all places where you can start, if you do it well and you really focus your intentions on doing these things. Again, let's separate Carlos from the teachings. Let's just look at the work and see what the validity of the work is. The work is about, again, observation. We're trying to see ourselves and see the world in a different way. So if I'm gazing at something, I'm not trying to see through it. I'm trying to see in that morphogenic field. Again, I'm trying to bring the second attention and the first attention together.
Inner silence, pretty self-explanatory, but is it sort of just to calm your inner chatter?
Well, I used to believe that inner silence was about meditation. I used to think that those were the same thing, and they're not. Meditation is, again, about observation, and what you're doing is, let's say you see the world, when you close your eye, your mind's eye sees a stream. What meditation is doing is taking every thought that you have and, let's say, assigning it to a leaf, and we're watching the leaves pass through this stream. All those self-concerns, we're seeing those things pass. We don't cling to any of them. We just observe them. What inner silence does is, as opposed to observing them and as opposed to trying to shut off the flow of that river at all or that stream at all, what we're doing is we're realizing that there's a space between the observation and the thought. And that's where we're trying to get, is in that place of that silence. And it's some pretty magical shit. Florinda said she was only able to get up to 8 minutes of inner silence. And this is someone who allegedly had been doing this work for 30 plus years. Recapitulated her entire life on a bus, going through Mexico. This is someone who did the work. And again, it's such a hard thing to try to nail down. What does that mean, the space between? It's the place where the observer and the observed realize that distance is where both of them actually live. There's no separation. The observer is the observed.
Well, it sounds like kind of observing something without placing any unnecessary filter on it, or just letting it tell you what it is, as opposed to you telling yourself what it is.
Right. When we're in inner silence, we're not talking to ourselves about what's happening. That is on mute. With meditation, you're not trying to mute anything. You're just letting things flow. With inner silence, the goal is really to have enough energy so the flow stops on its own.
Discipline and impeccability.
Well, I mean, discipline seems pretty self-explanatory.
To what degree?
How you, yeah, and but how you look at it is what makes it different. Because some people, I always use the alcoholic example because to me it's the best example. I know people who are alcoholics who haven't had a drink in 40 years. And they can tell you the last day, the last moment, the last drink, where they were, what they were wearing, what they smelled like when they had that drink.
Yes.
Okay. So they're not living a disciplined life. What they're doing is they're living that same life of that same day on repeat over and over and over and over and over again, as opposed to breaking the chain with that thing, and then they have no relationship with it whatsoever. So discipline doesn't mean denial. It means being able to be accountable for your energy, where you have put it, and how you have engaged it. So impeccable acts fall along with discipline. I can be driving to work and look over on the side of the road and see someone stopped at the side of the road. I'm going to be late if I pull over, if I deal with that. But something inside me tells me to stop. That thing that engages me, that makes me stop, that helps those people, that does it without reward, that does it without any trying to get any type of accolade, doesn't share it with anybody, that's an impeccable act. It's giving the best of yourself, the best energy that you have to any given situation.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's more than being present. That's like being hyper present. Being able, so awake in the moment that not only can you see it for what it is, but you can sort of try and usher it to a higher level in a sense, or at least your place in it, which inevitably is going to affect the whole situation anyway.
We're talking about Christ consciousness. We're talking about Buddha consciousness. It is a level of awareness that we should all really, really aspire to. It's a level of unconditional love for humanity and for sentience that we should all aspire to. What stops us is our ego. It's our own self-concern. It's the thing that goes, oh, I can't stop. I'll be late for work. Me. What's better for me? What's important to me? That's the thing that fucks us. What is important is to see these moments of grace that we've been given and do something with them.
Dig it. This is one that doesn't sound positive, but perhaps you can fill us in. Stalking. Stalking
is about identity. It is not about anything nefarious or doing something negative.
It's not about non-consensual pursuit.
It's not about non-consensual pursuit. It's about the suit that we wear, the armor that we wear every day that we call ourselves ... Chris has a certain uniform that he wears. Hunter has a certain uniform that she wears. Every day when I go out into the world and I put on the Hunter suit, there's a certain way that I dress, that I conduct myself, that I interact, that I speak with people. There's a rhythm to my tone. There's a rhythm to my energy. And when I stalk, if I were to stalk a different place of my assemblage point or a different part of my cocoon, my energy egg, I could maybe don a different outfit and a different persona and a different lifestyle and different friends. Now these are all encompassing. So I wouldn't be, it's not like I'm Hunter Monday through Friday and then Saturday and Sunday I'm Josephine. No, when I take on the role of stalking another position in my assemblage point, I fully become that thing. And this can be a years and years and years process. So Taisha Abelar talks about in her book about becoming other people. She became a businesswoman. She became a beggar on the street. and a male, and she actually fully took on these characteristics of these assemblage points. And the idea is, again, that you are in observation. You see that Hunter is a story. Chris is a story. These are things that we tell ourselves. The building block that makes our quote unquote life is the story, the mesmerism that our parents do to us, that we do to each other. That we say, this is where you were born. This is who you were as a child. This is who you are as an adult.
I think ultimately it's about what we do to ourselves, because we don't have to accept any of that.
Sure, right. But when you're a child, the only information you have is the information your parents sublimate on you. So they can tell you things that don't resonate with you, but who knows how you process that? Some kids just tamp down who they really feel that they are to be this character that their parents are creating for them.
Yeah, definitely. And then they take it on themselves. And then it becomes so infused with who they think they are that they don't see that it actually came from someplace completely outside of them.
Foreign, and so easy to then bifurcate your brain and be able to live these dual lives where let's say you're a modern businessman and you live this certain type of a life and you get married and you live what your parents' reality was for you, but secretly you live this other life because that's your truth. And so what's damaging about that is that we are not being authentic in either one of those situations.
Yeah, I guess the trick would be for somebody that may not feel like they have a good compass to navigate that territory is what is authentic. I mean, you've got to really tune in on how you respond to situations that you have in your life.
Yeah, and the part that always kind of confused me was who's the one who decides what my energy needs? Mm-hmm. Is it like, so Carlos is the one who's going to tell me what I need to be? Or that's my own ego that's going to come in and say, no, you need to do, that's where it doesn't make sense as a system of action, because there's no guide, there's no compass. So you don't know if you're just an egomaniac that's trying to, go be a philanderer because that's what feels good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it depends on, that's kind of very subjective territory. So doesn't this have to do with something called the selector? And then are these different personas self-chosen, or are they foisted on us by somebody else? Or
well, that again, this is the thing that was never really clarified in the seminars. They never really said, well, this is how I decided to become a beggar on the street. Mm-hmm. Or this is how I actually pulled off becoming an international businesswoman, and this is how I acquired that wealth. Like, there was no explanation. There was no, and people were so fucking mesmerized and so, numbed out that no one stood up and goes, well, this doesn't make any sense. So you went from, you were a beggar on the street and male, and now suddenly you have millions of dollars and living in a fancy house in Mexico. Like, who is funding all of this? Yeah. Where did all of this come from? But, you're so in love with the possibilities of all these other things, because everything I've listed, doesn't it sound fucking cool to live that free of your ego? Who wouldn't want that other than an egomaniac? So the sales pitch is fantastic. We all go, yes, I want to be free. I want to be free. And so you kind of gloss over those things. Go, oh, well, I'll figure it out later. I'll figure out what role I'm supposed to play. But, the way they sold these things toward the end was, but there's really no hope for you because you don't have a Nawal, and Carlos is the last of his lineage. And so really, if you go on this path, be prepared to go completely insane. I mean, they actually said this. This will drive you crazy. If you do this, this will drive you crazy because You're trying to fight. You're the salmon that's trying to go against the stream of life and every other thing that every other person on this planet is trying to do. So if you have no inner strength, it's going to be impossible. If you do have inner strength, it's going to seem like you're never getting anywhere on the path.
Well, perhaps people are drawn to that kind of crazy because that kind of crazy is better than their kind of crazy. Like, sure. Yeah, like they're willing to make that trade.
Exactly. And that, a huge part of religious fervence is faith and just not having any evidence to support that faith and just saying, I don't care. I am just going to sign on this because this is the best game in town.
Sure. Inevitably, you're going to reach that fork in the road in your life one time or another, or several hundred times, depending on who you are. It's just what you do with that,
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think where I got snagged with Christianity, and I consider myself a Christian and also a Buddhist, so I call myself a Christian with a Buddhist rising. I think where I got snagged with Christianity was not the beauty of Jesus Christ's teachings, or seeing Jesus Christ as the Son of God, or seeing Jesus Christ as an actual enlightened being who walked this earth. Where I got snagged was the fucking collection plate. That's where I go, oh, bummer. So this isn't about Jesus' teachings. This is about me feeding into this machine that you've named Jesus' teachings.
That's just that it became a racket. Organized religion turned it into a racket.
And I think that's where a lot of people start to slip into these weird sects and these weird cults and these weird other versions of religion, because it is an innate part of our humanity. This is part of who we are, to commune. We want to connect with each other. And on a spiritual level, that is a level of relating to another human being that we just yearn for it. There's an urgency to it that we all want. And so when you've gone to these very systematized forms of religion, and they've betrayed you or betrayed your family or people that you love, it makes it really easy to take that energy and focus it somewhere else, because you got to unpack it somewhere. And so what many people do is they turn that light off and they make the TV God. And then that becomes where the doctrine is dispensed. And so if you don't turn to the TV, then the other place can be, variant types of exercise, or, other types of religions or religious fervents that you dive into. I know some people who take hobbies to that level, where there's like this cult nature to that hobby, that, they speak the hobby language.
I know Vulcan.
They only connect with people who also speak that same hobby. So that kind of obsession is, for me, it's coming from a place of spirituality and wanting spirituality, or wanting some higher connection, but having that energy go unchecked.
For sure. Definitely. Well, let's go back to describing, if you could tell us what an assemblage point is, because that's pretty fucking important in all of this too. And what is the importance of shifting it?
Yeah. So he did talk about the assemblage point throughout his books. The assemblage point is the place in our physical body and also in our awareness, in that cocoon, where all of our perceptions and reality meet. This is where the building blocks of what we call our world exist, is where your assemblage point is. So someone that was born 600 years ago, and they lived, let's say here in America, when it was basically tribes, that were living amongst each other, fighting amongst each other. They had all had their own spirituality. They had all had their own rituals. Those people, their assemblage points was at a specific place based on their environment and the reality that they were co-collaborating in and existing in.
Like their hand of cards that you're dealt.
It could be considered that, or it could just be, I would just say, it's the way that you perceive the world. Now, shifting your assemblage point does exactly what that sounds. If you think that the assemblage point is how you perceive the world, if you shift your assemblage point, you're shifting how you see the world. So Carlos claimed that he was such a dumbass, that he was so concretized in his Carlosness and his reality, that Don Juan needed to give him datura, Jimson weed, peyote, mescalito. He had to give him these things in order to make that shift. He also claimed that when he first met Don Juan gave him a blow to his back in the middle of his shoulder blades where the assemblage point is purported to be, and that blow, because he was a Nahual, that blow shifted Carlos's assemblage point to the second attention. Now, I wouldn't recommend your listeners to go around and slap people in the back. I don't think that that's a good idea. I don't think it's our job to try to shift other people's perceptions of reality.
Against their will.
Against their will, or even with their consent. I think that these are things that are so self-determined, and so, again, we are so even though we're all connected, our cocoon, our energy is very much our own. And so it's not my job to go around to the world and see whose energy I can shift. I think my job is to focus on my own energy and look at my own behavior and my own snags. And by that right action, by doing those specific things, my assemblage point and my energy will naturally shift. And it won't be because some Indian hit me in the back.
That makes sense. And in the first part of this, we also talked about dreams, talked about lucid dreaming. But in the stuff that you gave me to read, they also talked about not only waking up, but waking up in a second dream in the same position. What is the importance of that? And what does it take to get to that point? Well,
I think the main part of what your question is about, and is important about that question, is that first step, which is that you're able to wake up in your dream. In the books, how Carlos talked about it was observing your hands. So when you fall asleep and you have that moment where you think you're waking up in the dream, that the first thing that Don Juan told him to do was look at his hands. That was an arbitrary thing to pick out. He could have said, look at your big toe, look at your knee. Could have been look at anything. What I started to do when I started to experiment with dreaming was I got very adept at being able to see my hands. What I wasn't adept at was actually physical action and doing things. So I went to the place of, let me see if I can flick on a light switch, or if I can look in a mirror, something that was a little bit more action-based, like more concrete. And so when he's talking about waking up in a dream, he's talking about being able to wake up with your awareness and realize that you're dreaming. Now, if you're able to do that at that level, then the idea is that you can then go to sleep in that first dream and then go into dreaming again and wake up in that dream. All of this is about being able to control your awareness and not slip back into the place where you're just a passive observer of a dream, where you're not an architect, where you're not actually doing anything. So these examples, the reason why they're so important is because you're trying to make the second attention again fold over, almost like a Mobius strip, where you're on one side of the strip and awareness is on the other side, and you've melded those two. You see that they're actually the same.
Because it can be really difficult just to go lucid in the first time in a dream, right? Without waking up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we are at such a gross disadvantage in so many ways compared to 30 plus years ago when I started this process, because back then we didn't have nearly the amount of radio waves and just electromagnetic waves flowing through the air and all of these things that kind of dull down our senses. These things weren't going on to nearly the extreme that they are now, and so you really have to be able to power down all the electronic energy around you to get anywhere near this type of work now.
Okay, well, since we're on the subject of dreaming, there are how many gates of dreaming? 7 gates of dreaming?
Allegedly 7 gates.
Okay. What do they involve?
So the first gate of dreaming is that place that we were talking about going to sleep and waking up in your dream. It's
lucid dreaming.
Lucid. Well, what other people claim or call lucid dreaming as well. The thing that's interesting about that is that the first stage is about connecting to the body. So we're trying to take, again, this first attention and apply it to the second attention. So when you wake up in that dream, the first thing that he said, the obvious thing to look at would be just to look down and look at your hands and see if you could hold the awareness of gazing at your hands in the dream.
Okay. You can just keep going down the gates if you like. What the second gate? And what about the second gate?
Okay.
We kind of went over that too, didn't we?
Yeah. So the second gate is when you wake up in your dream, you've looked at your hands, you go back to sleep, and then you wake up in that dream. But how you've woken up in that dream is that first person who went to sleep is observing the dreamer in that second dream. Are we following?
I think so. I think it's you kind of had to be there sort of situation.
It's like, just imagine like a ripple in a pool. If you threw like a rock into a still pool, you're basically going from one of these ripples into the next ripple. Mm-hmm. And the thread of that is your consciousness and your awareness, and you're being able to use that same level of consciousness and awareness that you have in your waking life, what we call our waking life, in this dreaming life.
So this phrase that I think is really cool, and it could be a great name for somebody's memoirs. The second gate is the graveyard of failed sorcerers. Does that mean if you're failed because you haven't gotten past that point?
Well, that's an easy place to get stuck. It's very easy, and again, this is what Carlos claimed happened to Don Juan. They think, in quotes, they think that he got stuck in the second attention. So he is lodged somewhere in that second, quote-unquote, reality, that second level of awareness. What would seem appropriate is if you imagine someone who on this plane, in this level of awareness, has a tremendous amount of energy and can use that energy and really lives on this warrior's path. If you imagine that energy has then gone into this second attention, it would be very easy to see that sorcerer, that warrior, would be able to get caught there because they were so powerful in this first attention. It would be very easy to manifest a reality in this second attention that would feel real and seem real and feel like that was the end of the journey.
Okay, well, let's keep going on. What the hell could the third gate have to offer? If that was the second gate. Jesus Christ. Inception times 1,000.
That is. Inception is a very sorceric film. I mean, The Matrix is a very sorceric film because these are films about understanding that the known or consensus reality is clearly not the only one, that there are multiverses, that there's infinite realities, that we are just, we're in many ways we're like monkeys with guns. We live this very rudimentary, very base life, and there's very few people who err outside of that. There's plenty of us that have the ego that feel like we're doing the work, but the reality is that to live in the magical realm, to live in this place that we're all talking about, and live in this known reality is almost impossible. If you were a billionaire, I think of people that have unlimited wealth. These are people who have the time to truly do this type of work. They don't have to worry about resources and maintenance of lifestyles, where the average person lives in this kind of slave reality where we have to go to work every day. We have to make money. We have been enslaved by this desire and this need to feed our egos, these very base simian needs. So to imagine taking these steps and truly being able to do them in an egolessness way seems like an untenable task for most of us. But I think it's a worthy pursuit. I think this is a much better place to focus your energy on observing your behavior and shaving away the ego, the things that are necessary that we need to survive, and really getting rid of the things that we don't need. So every level of this is, again, it's about waking up, but not only in some utopia. That's not what we're really trying to do. It's just getting to the place where you're using your energy on this plane in the most valuable, efficient way possible. And that's not fighting with people in social media. That's not primping and preening. That's not these grooming rituals that we do. These aren't necessarily the places that we need to be focusing our attention and our energies. The dreaming world is a place where it's really more about just raising your level of awareness. And I think that's a worthy pursuit.
Did you pull those examples just out of a hat? Just randomly?
I'm looking at myself, it's like, This is the stuff, these are the things that snag me. Like, I'm a woman, I live in the world, I have the same concerns that humans have. We all want to be loved and accepted, and we all want positive attention, and we want to avoid negativity. That's the thing that we are kind of groomed and taught to do is consensus, and all of us being liked and feeling a part, feeling connected, the community, the communing. So I think when you do this type of work, it's very solitary in many ways. It's not about being together. the work of a warrior, the work of sorcery is very, very solitary. So, that's part of the sales pitch here is, okay, you don't have to be connected to the people in your daily life. Those people snag you. Those people are petty tyrants. Those people give you a lot of negative attention. But if you go into the dreaming world, you can manufacture or create an energy or a world around you where you're not getting snagged in the same way. So the goal, of course, is like the deeper you go into these dreams, the more magic you're creating, the more energy you have to do more magical things, traveling, and that goes into these next areas. So after we wake up in the third gate of dreaming, you can go into another reality using a door, a porthole, the television, and once you've done that, the idea is that you're in the fourth gate of dreaming and you're starting to learn to astral travel, to use your energy body. So, I mean, this is some insane stuff. It's pretty crazy. If we can do this, where do I sign? And I've been working on this path pretty much my entire adult life, on and off. I've been on the warrior's path. This next level that he's talking about is actually about time travel. So you're taking your energy, so you, Chris, would be able to, through your dreams, go back in time, go forward in time, connect with whatever energy it is that you want to connect with, dream with other people if you want to, which again goes into the fifth gate of dreaming, which is being able to basically take your energy body and shift it to the first attention. So you take your energy body and you've now pulled it into this awake reality. That's the energy that you live with, that you connect with other people with. So it's basically like taking your magic and applying it to your daily life.
So it's like a template, and it's another layer laid upon reality. You still inhabit your physical body. You just inhabit it with something more vast and vibrant.
Yeah, it's like your energy body is away from you. It's on Mars. By this stage, when you've reached the fifth gate, you're actually taking your energy body from Mars and you're connecting it to this body in this reality and being able to take that level of heightened awareness and perceive the world and interact with the world. So there would be no fear or anger or upset because you would be able to perceive the resonance and the vibration of what you're perceiving, and you would be able to discern what is what and avoid negative energy. So then the next step is going to be the sixth gate of dreaming, which is,
refer to your hymn books.
This is the stuff that, again, they were talking about and claiming that was going to happen when Carlos died, that you physically take your body with you, your awareness, your shoes, the socks you're wearing, the underwear, every scar and scratch you have on your body, you take it all with you into your sixth level of dreaming, which is taking the physical body, being able to go to sleep in your dreams, being aware that you're dreaming, all of those gates, you've passed through all of those gates. Now, instead of the energy body going to the physical body, now the physical body is going to meet the energy body on that inner sixth layer of the onion. So, what's the final gate, the seventh gate? Here we go. What happens? It's at the moment you die, you take it all with you.
Your memory,
your thoughts, your physical body. But of course, we don't have the same self-concerns. So when we say our memory, our thoughts, we've already recapitulated our lives. What does that mean, my memory, my thoughts? I am pretty much an empty vessel by this point, because I've detached myself energetically from all the things that snagged me. My family, my friends, all the people who upset me, anyone who was a petty tyrant. I've let all those people go.
and the person that you brought up earlier, the woman, that's what she experienced for 8 minutes? Or was that just the second attention?
She's just talking about achieving inner silence in this
okay.
attention.
Gotcha. Okay. So obviously somebody claims to know about all of these attentions because they've visited there or they've talked to somebody who came back.
This is what Carlos said that Don Juan had experienced. This is the teachings. Mm-hmm. This is where we were all supposed to be heading if we did the work. But again, the asterisk in that is you're never going to get there because you don't have a Nawal. And the only way that you can grab on to the tail of that comet is if you have one. So this is a worthy pursuit, because why the hell not would you want to do this? Why would you want to be a bored fuck? Why would you want to live the life of an ordinary person and die an ordinary life if you could die an extraordinary way and actually have the opportunity to take your awareness and your physical body with you? So that was the pitch with that asterisk, like, okay, try it for the hell of it, but it's never going to happen for you because you don't have a Nawal. And he's out of here. Carlos is out of here. He's leaving. And we are his party. And that's it. This is the end of the line. And this, Chris, this is such a valuable, valid point. If that was true, if what I heard in seminars from these people's mouths was true and he was the end of the line, then why the fuck would you ever have a seminar in the first place? Why would you just not do your magic, burn from within, take your awareness, take your party, and fuck off? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense, because all you're doing then is selling someone snake oil. You're saying you're never going to be able to do this. But here's the book. Let me sell you these movements. Let me sell you these videotapes.
Was he hoping somebody would hack it and actually be able to go outside of that limited system?
He didn't give a shit if we made it or not. I mean, that's part of the recapitulation. Like, remember, he's supposedly done all this work. He's reached all these gates. So he doesn't care about us. Again, so why would you give a seminar? Why would you stand in front of thousands of people? Why would you charge people thousands of dollars to come and see you speak if what you were selling wasn't legitimate? If you couldn't promise that, like, why is it just nah, look, I'm going to freedom, fuck the rest of you guys? Like, that doesn't make sense.
One big long flipping of the bird.
It's incongruent with what these teachings are.
So what role do petty tyrants, I just love the combination of those two terms. They seem very symbiotic. Petty tyrants, what role do they have in all of this? What are they?
Petty tyrants are the energies or the people that are in your life that snag your attention and your awareness. The people that cut you off on the street and then, an hour and a half, you're still thinking about that and annoyed, or the guy who said something snarky to you when you were crossing the street and you didn't have the instant retort, and, a day later, you're like, oh, that's what I should have said. Like, anything that grabs your attention or your awareness in a negative way. It's not about positive energy when we're talking about a petty tyrant. We're talking about something that is that feeling, that niggling feeling inside that just makes you just irritated. And that can be, again, as simple as a traffic infraction, someone doing something annoying, to your child grabbing your skirt and going, mama, 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 over and over and over and over again. That your kids have way more of an opportunity to be petty tyrants because your energy is way more attached to them. So there's more of a battle, there's more of an exchange happening.
You're more densely intertwined.
You're psychically and energetically entwined, and so there's a way bigger payoff in that exchange for both of you. So part of the parenting thing, one of the reasons that he talked about not being a parent is because of that dynamic and because of that energy. And if you really want to be on the warrior's path, you cannot give your child the attention psychically and energetically that they need to thrive and grow, because a huge part of being a parent is the sacrifice of your you-ness. Like, suddenly you're eating and your child grabs the food directly out of your mouth and puts it into their mouth because they see no distinction. They see you as them. So as you evolve, that becomes more enmeshed and more ingrained. And what he's saying is that the only way that you can deal with that is the impeccability of being able to detach yourself energetically and allow that person to, like, basically redream them. And instead of seeing them as yours and an ownership thing, you really allow them to be an individual and their own person and have their own personality and own wants and needs and loves. And that's hard for some parents. I think it's contingent on why you became a parent. To me, I see it as kind of a opposite way. Again, it's the Sisyphus rock. Okay, you chose to have a child, which means that you've chosen that dynamic. Your karma and this child's karma are deeply enmeshed and ingrained, and so there's a lesson there to learn, maybe of that objectivity. Maybe the lesson is to be able to see them as their own being, their own energy. And so I think that's where kids are valuable. I don't see that as a detriment. I think that is a much better life lesson in egolessness than just letting go the guy who pulls over in front of you or flips you off on the street. It's like, yeah, we can let that go, but this is the worthy pursuit.
Yeah. And if you're getting snagged, you're constantly getting snagged by that, but maybe it's something you need to look at in the mirror, not the situation itself. And again, it still operates on this model. It's like the petroleum-based version of having a finite amount of energy instead of tapping into this Tesla free energy model where there's tons of it and there's an abundance. As a matter of fact, it's an embarrassment of abundances.
Exactly. That morphogenic field that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, that Alex Gray has drawn so beautifully, that is infinite. And so what our ego says, the me-centric, what I call the makes me feel culture that we've created in people, is making your emotional state completely contingent on other people's behavior and how other people respond to you. And what that creates is a victim mentality, because suddenly I'm waiting for approval. and my sense of self-worth is directly contingent on how other people treat me or react to me. And so when you do that, you become extremely powerless. And so what I see in this is that so much of our journey has to be about observing how you take on other people's behavior. Do you accept that? Do you say, that's my truth, that's my reality? Or are you able to see someone else's actions and go, okay, this is what that person's experiencing right now, and I'm just observing it. And I can jump in, or I can just stand here and be the witness.
Well, I like what Lynn Forrest said in the episode a few episodes back, when she said something like, there are no shoulds. There's not a perfect version of the scenario that you're in. It's just all a negotiation. The idea is, how are you going to negotiate it? To everybody's positive outcome, or to this story that you're telling yourself about something that may or may not even exist.
Yep, exactly. And I really love that episode. It's one of my favorites that you've done. What I wanted to tell her in listening to that is that I once had the same observation. You teach people how to treat you by the treatment that you accept. And I think that that's the first level of that dialogue that we should have with ourselves. Because for me, the reality that I've experienced is that I'm not teaching anybody anything. What I'm observing is what other people have learned in their own lives. So what I'm seeing is what someone else has learned. It's not what I'm teaching them. And it's what I do with that. So I can either adopt their feeling and take that on as my own and take that on as my truth, or see that and go, wow, this person must have been treated badly because this is what they think is appropriate. That's not my doing. That's the package that they came with. So I think that's an important part, again, of getting away from this makes me feel culture. No one is making you feel anything. We are not victims of our realities. We are co-collaborators.
Well, I think it gives perception too much credit. Okay, you may perceive yourself as being affected by something negatively because you see it as an offense or whatever, that somebody is not respecting you, but you can't control that. I mean, you can't change the landscape, you just have to change the lens. So let's take the focus off of perception and put it onto, the context. The context is often what is lost in those interactions, and context is, I think, is important as content.
100%. Where I start the conversation internally is what am I saying to myself? What am I hearing here? When this person is saying this to me, what does this mean to me? I don't necessarily think that I'm hearing their truth. I'm sublimating my version of my reality and what those words mean to me on what they've said to me. So it's really important to understand that, because when you understand that, you see no one else is in control of your emotional state. People can say things to you and you can thank them for it, but understand that's their reality. That's their way of perceiving something. That doesn't have to resonate with you. You don't have to take it on. It's not yours if you didn't create it. So I think going back to the petty tyrant thing, that's, again, it's all about observation. It's observing yourself and seeing how you react to other people's stimulus. Am I going to jump on the ship of anger and rage with them, or am I just going to see that ship flow by and go, wow, that was interesting? So when I talk about these things, these are all things that I have experienced in my own ego and in my own consciousness. There's no self-righteousness here. I don't feel better than anybody. I get snagged in these same ways. I'm still learning. I'm still very much in the process of understanding reality and understanding what part of it I am contributing to.
Yeah, because at some point, inevitably, somebody's going to hand you a flaming bag of shit. And either you're going to put it down and stamp it out, or you're going to hand it to somebody else.
Exactly. And I think that's what some people call family tradition.
Passing the bag of shit?
Yeah. It becomes this thing of taking ownership of other people's realities and other people's consciousness that isn't yours. Just because you have some DNA connection with someone doesn't mean that you have to own their disease, that you have to take on whatever it is that was their cross to bear. I think the part of the recapitulation that resonated with me was examining your family and going back generations and looking, what is the common disease in my family that killed my family? What's the common thing that happened? Like, when you start to do that, then you see this kind of web of connection as humans, that we all have these things that have happened. There's multiple people who have families that have had PTSD or cancer or heart disease, so that's where we become one, and we become a collection of humans, and this becomes a human experience because we see our story, but our story is the story of humanity. And so do we keep playing that same role over and over and keep deciding the same things and saying this is the length of a human life and this is what it's supposed to be like, and you get born and you go to school and you fall in love and you have kids and it's like, and then you die, and it's like somewhere along there one of us has woken up and gone, oh no, that's just like the story that I was told, that's the fairy tale I was told that is life. But I think the awakening that's happening is that more and more of us are going, that doesn't serve our reality as a collective consciousness to go by this rote way of evolution. There's so much more out there. There's so much vastness that we have to explore, that we should explore. It behooves us for generations. Like we owe it to ourselves as a species to stop this navel gazing and really stop being affected by each other in this very myopic way and being offended constantly. Like, really check yourself. If you want to get anywhere in this universe and in this dreaming verse that we're talking about, you've got to start checking your ego. Like, where are you in that? How often do you get snagged and just get so frustrated in the day because of someone that has made you feel something?
Which is giving up your sovereignty right then and there.
Don't do it. If you walk away from one thing in this whole series about talking about Carlos Castaneda and this cult, is don't give your sovereignty away for an illusion, for someone who's saying, and we don't know if it's going to work or not. Don't do it. Do it for the hell of it. If you want to pursue dreaming, meditation, prayer, whatever your form of connection with this spirit and the oneness that is humanity, do it. But if you're going to hand over the keys to your castle, just make sure you know who you're handing them to.
Yeah. Hear, hear. I agree. No, I think when you become obsessed with being offended, to me that's like a very loud drinking dog. That is a symptom of a culture that has reached a certain level of comfortability. Is that the way to say that?
Definitely.
When we can start nitpicking about stuff like that, and just becoming obsessed about being offended in and of itself, regardless of what it's about. and to hold it in such high importance. You must be well taken care of in other areas of your life if you have a lot of time to just spend looking for things to be enraged about, you know?
What that means is you didn't have to walk 20 miles to get water that day.
Yeah, for instance.
If you have time to be so worried that you didn't get enough likes on your Facebook post, or the person that you sent a private message didn't respond to you, or the makeup tutorial that you watched didn't end up in the way that you wanted it to, and she did her blush wrong, then maybe it's time to take a step back and assess and say, okay, who am I? Like, what's important to me? Does this stuff that's coming from this tool, this little box, does this really matter? Like, where is that going to take me ultimately in my life? Like, what is the worthy pursuit?
Okay, back to the world of Don Juan.
Let's do it.
I should say of Carlos Castaneda. I really only have one more thing on the list of things that I wanted to make sure and bring up. So if you want to add anything after that, you're more than welcome to. I'll just simply say a piss, a fart, a puke. Where in the hell does that fit in the whole puzzle of the Castanedian cult?
Well, it's kind of like being in a Buddhist temple, or in a Buddhist monastery, and you get racked on the head with a piece of cane because you've behaved badly. I think people love to be called out on their shit, and they love to be nailed for kind of the worst sides of their personality. And so Don Juan, in this very, kind of savvy, contemporary to the 60s age, classified humans in this way. And he said that, and now, of course, I'm not quoting directly, he said that the piss is the person, basically the person who is the do-gooder, the one who always wants to help, is the martyr. Okay, that's the piss. The fart is the exact opposite. Fart is the know-it-all, the one who, blows the largest horn but has the least in tune.
Talent.
Yeah, exactly. And the puke, that's the person that you have to get them to make a decision, to get them to say anything, that you've got to drag it out of them. They absolutely don't give you anything. They're just absolutely like the pain in the eye. You've got to pull it out of them.
They keep their cards tight to their chest.
Well, more like they're the asshole that's the last person in the room to say what they want when we're having lunch and we're all ordering out. They're the ones that drag it out and make it difficult and fuck up the order, and that's the puke. The piss is the one who's like, oh, well, I'll pay for it. And then later, they have no money in their checking account because they've paid for all these things for someone else, and they're the victim.
I see. Back to the victim triangle. Okay, as I said, that was the last thing that I have to bring up. Is there anything else that you would like to add to all the stuff that we laid out during this part, which will be the second of 3 parts?
Well, we had some technical difficulties when we initially recorded this interview, and that was about 5 months ago.
Yes.
So obviously a lot has happened in the world over the past 5 months. Namely, in the Carlos Castaneda research world, I have uncovered some really, really fascinating information, and I'm not ready to give you the exclusive scoop yet. I'm still doing the research, but I can say this, Chris. I am one step closer with making a definitive probably even in writing connection between Carlos Castaneda and the MK Ultra program. And so I just want to say that this has somehow, in some weird way, researching MK Ultra via the Carlos Castaneda cult has in some ways become my life's work, because I think this is not just about Carlos Castaneda and creating a cult or a mythos. I think it's really about the human experience and where we were in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and what happened in these very critical points in our history, and how that has informed the past 50, 60 years, and how it will continue to inform our future. Because a lot of this is about brainwashing and, again, giving up your sovereignty and the ability to control the masses. And what do we do with that? The part of the puzzle that I find most fascinating about that I'm digging deeper into, is connecting Charles Manson and what happened with Charles Manson and the Manson family, and what happened with Carlos Castaneda and his cult simultaneously, and how those two separate people took the same programming in two completely different directions.
Fantastic. I've never seen that or never heard of that connection being made. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. And I really want to thank you, because you're giving me this platform and creating this dialogue has really spurred me on to continue this work, because I think that there were a lot of people who put their lives and their hearts and their souls into Carlos Castaneda's hands and into the reality that he created, the consensus reality that he created. And there are those people, and then there are people on the way other end of the spectrum who have maybe heard of him, know something about him, or peyote or LSD, or just have some idea that there was some guy who was involved with an Indian back in the 60s. So, through the spectrum of that, I realized that his influence has really had an impact on our culture and our consensus reality. And it is my duty as someone who was involved in that world to expose anything that could potentially be nefarious. And I take that very seriously. And I think that if your listeners are people who have any experience with cults or these deep religious sects or thought philosophies that they go into where they give away their sovereignty, it really feels good to have someone resonate with you and be able to tell their story humbly and admit they're part of that. Like, I want to make sure that your listeners know I do not consider myself a victim of anyone, of Carlos Castaneda, of Don Juan's teachings, of any of these books. I think that I was a co-collaborator. I think that I was a co-conspirator. I think that I took part in selling a mythos because I believed it. And I wanted to believe it, because every other system that was being offered in the world was really about clearly feeding someone specific's ego. And what Carlos pitched and what got a lot of people interested was that his sales pitch was about freedom. And he was saying, I know the way to freedom, and I'm the only person who knows the way to freedom, and I'm the last lineage of people who are going to reach freedom. So if you have any interest whatsoever, this is the place to go. So I think that's a really important thing to note, is that he did sell 7 million books, and his books were translated into 26 plus languages, and people did lose their lives, and people did commit suicide, and there's many people who did give their sovereignty, and to this day are very loyal to this path and this process, and still understand that there is absolutely no guarantee of success. So I think it's important to be able to speak to that and give those people an opportunity to hear another perspective. And if they are brainwashed, have the ability to have some place to go and maybe start their own research and dot connecting and look at these papers and read these books that will give you more information. And when we do our next interview, I will give basically a bibliography of all of the places that I have found this information and connected these dots, because I think it's really valuable not to ever take anyone else's word for anything. And again, this is the cult mentality, is believe it and don't question it. And my mantra is, do not believe a word I say. Go and do your own research. Go figure it out for yourself. Here are the places, and now go look. And you make up your own mind. If you've read these books and this is your doctrine and this is your philosophy, then who gives a shit what I say? Because you know what you know, and it resonates with you. Maybe, this is the big question mark, maybe you've been hypnotized. Maybe you've been brainwashed. It's possible. It's important to constantly question yourself. That's the thing that I never gave up through the whole process. When I was in a conference and I looked around and there was a sea of 400 people and every single one of them was asleep with their eyes closed and he was talking, I was like, oh, these people are hypnotized. Okay. I think that it's okay to admit that, and it's okay to have been a part of that. What's important is to understand that you've given yourself to something. It's okay. Be a devout Catholic. The church has raped and pillaged this earth, but if that is your truth and that is the doctrine that resonates with you, follow it. If you are a Christian and that's your reality, follow your truth. For me, I think it's really, really important to be able to separate what the teachings are from who these teachers are. Jesus Christ was, for me, this is my opinion, Jesus Christ was a enlightened being, very possibly an alien or a hybrid. There's evidence to that point. So I believe that Jesus Christ inhabited this earth. I believe that the Buddha inhabited this earth. There are myriad religions that have stories of enlightened beings that have inhabited this earth, all throughout indigenous peoples' lore. There's thousands of stories. So I think it's possible. I think if you're looking towards someone specifically, let's say a famous person, as your idol, as your North Star, I think you're running into dangerous territory if you don't allow yourself to see that as a full person. If you just see the positive of someone and if you're not allowing yourself to say, well, that person's still human and they're fallible and they make mistakes, then you're doing yourself a disservice. For me, that's what took me to this journey, is that I wanted to investigate where I was putting all of my energy. I didn't sit back and just read the books or just go to the seminars. I did the work. I had magical experiences. So I was able to separate what was Carlos Castaneda and what was tensegrity, or what was recapitulation, or what was inner silence. He maybe laid out the task, but ultimately I had to do that work. So do I believe that Carlos Castaneda was a sorcerer or a Nawal that was a teacher? By some definitions, I do. I say that, of course, with a pause, because there's another side of me in my investigations that has connected Carlos with the CIA and the MK Ultra program. So that's where things get complicated. Because, again, I see the teachings, and then I see Carlos Castaneda as a man, and I know the treachery and the majesty that humans are capable of. So I'm still trying to reconcile these two things. Do I think the teachings work? Absolutely. But you could do the same thing with exercise. You could do the same thing with Buddhism. You could do the same thing with Christianity. Do I think that was the only road to freedom? Absolutely not. Do I think that he was also a snake oil salesman? Yes. So I guess I would just end it by saying stay tuned. Chris and I are going to do another interview. We're going to figure out when part 3 is going to happen, and it's going to take me a little bit because I've got to, again, I need to hear back from some people and finish my dot connecting. But again, I'm so grateful and so thankful for all of you who are listening. It really means the world to me. Thank you for hearing my truth, and I really thank you, Chris. You are such an amazing interviewer, and you make it so easy. Thank you.
You're welcome. The pleasure is mine. Thank you for trusting this whole situation enough to come in and spill your guts about it. It's much appreciated. And I'm sure it will be beneficial to many of the people listening out there.
Well, I would say to all of your listeners, if there's one message that I say this with love and peace and heart in my heart, is please wake up. Please wake up. Don't give your sovereignty away to anyone. Really, really take ownership for yourself, your health, your own human body. You are the architect of this life and this experience, and you can make it a hell realm if you want to, or you can make it a heaven. So let's all really work collectively on making the world, our world, a better place for each other and for ourselves.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
Salute. Thank you again so much. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Well, pardon me if I don't go on and on, because if you can tell, I have a bit of a head cold, and it doesn't make me very fond of speaking at the moment. But I will tell you that was an incredibly informative conversation and a wonderful continuation of the story that Hunter laid out about her life up until the point where she read the Don Juan books, and then how that eventually evolved into her getting involved with the cult surrounding Carlos Castaneda. And this episode went more into the teachings and sort of more into the code of conduct that surrounded the system of beliefs and practices that surrounded Carlos at that time. Highly informative stuff. Before I met Hunter, I had no idea there was any cult surrounding Carlos Castaneda. All I knew was the Don Juan books, which influenced me a lot at a particular point in my life. And then I started hearing more and more about how they were supposedly fictitious. But it really didn't take away from the teachings for me that much. I was a little disappointed because what excited me about those books was thinking that this person was an actual character that he had encountered. And as time went on and I read more books and researched more, I realized that there were plenty of, regardless of whether he was real or not, there are plenty of real shamans and real magicians in the world that are just as, if not much more incredible and astounding and compelling. So I very much look forward, as Hunter alluded to towards the end there, to the third and final part of this series, when she goes more into possible, if not very probable, connections with the MK Ultra program and the CIA. and how maybe Carlos was seeded to sort of, how to put it, make a cult, sort of like Charles Manson and many others around that time, where these seeds were planted, not knowing exactly in what environment they were going to be germinating in. And that was kind of part of the experiment, to see how these things manifested in different contexts. So I am very much looking forward to that. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and got as much out of it as I did. There's plenty more to see on www.themeltpodcast.com. And if you liked it so much that you would like to keep it going and help me to expand it and make it even better, there are very many ways to do that. The most tangible would be going to www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. And there you can pledge anywhere from $1 up per month, and sort of subscribe to The Melt. And I'm very slowly but surely putting extra things up there. Mostly just video versions of some of the interviews that I've done, which I know is not a big deal. Plenty of people have video interviews on YouTube, but it's all I got right now. I'm open to ideas and suggestions. So there's that. And there is also sharing, spreading the word around the good old-fashioned way, whether that be talking with your friends face-to-face, posting it on your social media data harvesting context of choice, or giving it a good rating wherever you subscribe to it, whether that be iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, so on and so forth. Give it a good rating or give it a good review. That always helps the word to get out. And I think that about covers it. Sending good vibes is also appreciated and encouraged. That goes a long way also. If any of you have listened to many of the episodes many of the conversations that I've had with different people, I'm assuming you're hip to it already, but, intentions and thoughts and focusing our will and our energy on things, especially in a positive way, has a definite, tangible effect in the world. That is how we're going to make the world better. It's not going to be through any political party. It's not going to be by vote. It's not going to be by any law passing, anything like that. All of it is completely up to you. Once you realize that you are a very important fragment in this holographic universe, and that you also contain the entirety of the universe within you, just as every other entity in the universe does, or in the multiverse, and that you have as much power as anybody else in that picture, then I think you have a responsibility to sort of reflect your best out to the world, and that's what makes a good world. Start with the internal, reflects it to the external. That's my 2 cents anyway. Thank you so much for listening. There's tons of great stuff coming up. I'm very excited. I've almost got interviews lined up for the next couple of months, and there's a lot of great stuff ahead, so I'm very excited to be able to bring them to you. Thank you very much for listening. You're very much appreciated, and until next time, 2 weeks from now, take care. And I'm not on Facebook anymore, just in case you wonder why you don't get any notifications or contact from that arena, because I bowed out of Facebook. No, not there any longer. Where you can contact me are on links in the episode notes. Anyway, thank you so much. Take care.